board meeting. So I'm not going to open this as a school board meeting, but this is a community public meeting that we are sharing with our public. So thanks for coming tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to our CFO of our school district, Kathy Erickson.
And if you guys want to, if you want to see easier, feel free to. Yep. Good evening, everyone. Each year, every school district in Minnesota is required to hold a truth and taxation hearing. It has to be held after proposed property tax statements have been delivered to taxpayers and before December 28th, when you have to submit your public hearing information to the state of Minnesota. School districts are allowed to have it as part of their regular school board meeting or in conjunction with it, and it just needs to be held after 6 p.m. and part of that notification happened on your proposed property tax statements. I'm guessing you're not all here for truth and taxation, but thank you for being here. This is a great opportunity to learn a little bit about our school levy process and this year's current school district budget. Part of the process is I'll be doing a presentation of some information, and then there's an opportunity for public comment at the end. So each year, the school district does a proposed levy payable. So everybody that's a property owner within the Duluth Public School District, which includes the city of Duluth and some townships outside of the city limits, are a part of our levy certification process. So in July and August, the district reviews and submits data to the Department of Education. We also receive information from the Department of Education. In September, we get a first run of our proposed levy, which is called our proposed levy. The district submits a maximum in order for the Department of Education and the school district to continue to do calculations through September 30th and then into October and November. In November, the proposed property tax statements are delivered to property owners so they can see the impact of all entities, not just school districts. There can be cities and townships and other taxing districts on your proposed property tax statement to see what those impacts are. And then tonight is our public hearing for the proposed levy, and we'll be asking the board tonight to approve the final certified levy, which we will submit to the Department of Education. So the first component of our hearing tonight is to talk about the levy limitation and certification. For those that are excited about this, we can send you a copy if you want these in copies, but this just shows the bar graph of the components of our levy limitation and certification process. The school district levies on two different types of property. One is referendum market value and one is net tax capacity. So there's different property wealths associated with your proposed property, so then depending on which one applies, we put those towards those different tax rates. Anybody here own property in Duluth Public Schools? All right, go home tonight and look at your proposed property tax statement. It's going to be exciting. And then you can call and we can talk about it. So when you look at your different portions of your proposed property tax statements, on the statement, it'll be voter approved and other. So those are the two categories that you'll see on your proposed property tax statement. Duluth Public Schools does have a voter-approved operating referendum, so you'll see that portion in one line, and then everything else related to the school district and its levies will be under other local levies. This year for the school district, we have an increase of our levy limitation of about 5.96% compared to last year, but what we found out from the St. Louis County Auditor's Office is due to the changes in the overall tax capacity of our school district, the average increase for a home who doesn't change their property wealth is less than 1% or 0.7%. So if your property value stayed the same this year as compared to last year and you own a residential homestead, you're barely going to see any change in your property taxes. Now, if you have a property that has grown in value, you may be seeing an increase because of that growth in value. The different components of our levy are the voter-approved referendum. We also have RMV, which is not voter approved, and those are two components called local optional and equity and transition revenue. We have a general NTC other category. This includes a hodgepodge of things that we're required to levy for through the Department of Education, and then things that we opt in for, including things like safe schools that we put into the levy limitation and certification. We also have a levy for community service. So there's components of our community education that is part of our levy, and then we have our debt service. So the district is carrying the majority of our levy in our debt service category. To see a summary of levy changes, we did see some decreases, both positive and negative for adjustments. If you understand the levy process says that we do an initial levy in the year, because this levy is actually for fiscal year 23, which is a year from now. And as we get better and more information, they do adjustments from prior years and put them on the current levy. So some of the things that are affecting this year's levy are actually realities from our prior years. We also saw an increase in abatement adjustments. An abatement adjustment is when a property owner contests the valuation of their property, and we were supposed to collect a certain amount from them. They contested and are successful. Then we have to go and re-ask the remainder of the property wealth base to collect that remaining amount. So we are seeing that throughout the state of Minnesota, that there are increases in abatement collections, meaning we're re-levying to collect those dollars that we were not able to get. We also have long-term facilities maintenance project approvals. The district has over 15 school buildings plus other support buildings that we manage, and that long-term facilities maintenance levy is a big component of our levy. And we also have many adjustments from prior years, and then we also have the addition of some new leases. On the debt service fund, we saw a little bit of increase in our debt service, partially because our principal and interest schedules have been changing, and then we also did a refunding. So when the interest rate markets are favorable, we can go out and get better interest rates. So we ended up this past year doing a refunding, which we then basically pay off our old bonds, we resell new bonds at a lower interest rate for the district to save some money. Since I've been at the district, I think we've done 6 refundings in 3 years, which has meant that the market has been very favorable. Most of the time you can only refund one time, so we, I think, are just about out of opportunities to do refundings, but we've done very well to make sure that that has been happening. And then we also have what they call a debt excess penalty. The state of Minnesota each year, the Department of Education calculates how much revenue we need to collect for our debt service payments. If we have more levy or more tax payments than debt service payments we have to make, they'll artificially reduce the levy so that we use up that fund balance, so we're not carrying a lot of fund balance in debt service. And due to some of our refundings and savings, we've been able to save some of that money. So we're seeing some reduction this year on our debt excess to make sure that we lower the levy to use some of that fund balance. We're going to transition from talking about the levy certification to talking about the current year district budget. So just to give you a sense of how much of the levy certification is part of our school district budget, this pie shows approximately $151 million. That is our overall school district budget for this school year, fiscal year 22. Of this $151 million, about 27% only is coming from the levy. The rest is coming from other sources. So less than a third of our budget comes from property tax collections. You might note that this says payable 21, and we've been talking about the payable 22 levy. But for this year's budget, we're using last year's levy, because that's how that works. The levy that we're approving tonight is actually for next school year, fiscal year 23. So again, you can just kind of get that sense of how much of that levy limitation does our school district use as part of our revenue budget. And again, it's about 27%. For this school year, our budget again for revenues was approximately $151.8 million. the general fund. And when we say general fund, that includes our regular operational fund, our transportation fund, and our operating capital or construction, general construction, not bonded construction project fund. So that is the largest component of our budget, which is approximately 114.9 million in revenue and 114.9 in budgeted expenditures for this year. We also have a food service fund, and you can see that we are projecting a slight loss in food service this year. As many of you know, we are once again utilizing the free USDA lunches for type A lunches. So we don't have some of our auxiliary lines or a la cartes where we would be earning extra local revenue. So due to knowing that we have enough fund balance to help cover that cost, we have projected a slight decline in our food service fund. We also have our community service fund. Community service, when you think of the general courses that you can take, but community service is a lot more than that for our school district. The two big components here would be our Key Zone program. If you've participated in our after school or summer school program, that runs through our community service fund. And then also our friends at Head Start are in the community service fund. So that takes up a larger chunk of our community service fund. And you can also see that the community service fund is also projecting a slight decline overall. And again, this is partially because we have not been able to do as much community education due to capacity in our buildings and the ability to have as many activities as we've had in the past. So it's not collecting or generating as much revenue in the past as in the past. For this year, at the start, when we adopted this budget, we did not have a budget for our construction fund. We'll be adopting a revised budget in January or February, and that will include our new construction of our sale of our bonds for the construction on Central on the Hill, which is approximately $31 million, which will be spent over multiple fiscal years, so it all won't happen in the same fiscal year. Then we have our debt redemption or debt service fund. Again, you're seeing a net negative, and that's because we've generated money in our fund balance, so we'll be spending down part of that fund balance, so that is normal and expected. We also have a trust fund. This runs a small component of some of our retiree health insurance benefits, and some of our federal programs run through our trust. And then we have an internal service fund, which is our dental program. So we are self-insured for dental, and that runs through our internal service fund. We also have our student activities. There was a change in student activities by the state of Minnesota where we have to recognize specific approved student activities through the general fund and through a reserve fund balance. And then we also have many local activities that aren't necessarily considered student activities, but are at our sites at a local level. So again, we're just showing them separately, and we have about $1.3 million a year that's generated through our local and student activity funds. So overall, our general fund is showing a balanced budget, and then we have some funds, because they do have some dollars in their fund balances to help cover those losses. We are seeing some declines in some of our other funds. Where do we get our revenues? So when we look at that $151 million that we're receiving from different sources, we can see that over 60% is coming from state sources. So state sources is going to be that general education revenue that we get to collect per pupil, plus all of the different other sources of revenue for the school district. So you can see that a little over $90.7 million of that $151 million is coming in the form of different state sources. We also then have our local sources, which is approximately 31%. This includes the levy limitation and certification that we talked about, which was approximately $43 million. And then we have another $4 to $5 million, and those are going to be things like activity fees and gifts and grants and bequests and other donations. So those things come through that, and that's considered local. That would also include all of our food service fee-based revenues that come in for paid lunches. Then we have our federal revenue sources. Federal revenue is approximately $11.1 million, or 7% of our budget. And this, again, the biggest pieces here would be our Head Start program, our title programs, our federal special ed programs, and then our federal food service dollars. So those are those bigger components there. You're gonna see a line called other local sources. That is just a transfer that the district does each year. It committed part of its general fund to pay off some debt service related to the long range facilities plan. So each year we do a transfer out of the general fund to help cover that cost. Looking at the expense side, we narrowed it down to just the general fund versus all of our funds together, so we can kind of get a better sense of that general larger operating fund. And this is just giving you an idea of where we spend our dollars by program area. So of the $114.9 million that we budgeted, you can see that the largest budgeted area is our elementary and secondary instruction, or what we call the 200 series. Approximately $47 million, $47.1 million is in our elementary and secondary instruction. The next line, which is highest here, would be approximately $25.5 million for special education or special services. That is another component that is educational, but the Department of Education has us break that down separately. You can see sites and buildings. The blue bar is our third highest at $13.2 million. That's to manage all of our sites and buildings and the staff that goes along with it. Then you'll see pupil support services. That's our 700 series. That's going to include our transportation. That's going to include our counselors, our nurses, and other support staff. And then you're going to see instructional support services. This is going to be our curriculum department and staff development teams. And then you'll see here at the bottom, district support services. That includes business office, technology, other district support services. And then finally, administration. That includes our district and site level, so including all building principals and other administrators into that fund. So you can see those percentages based by program area. We take that same $114.9 million and look at it from what we call the object area. So of that $114 million, how do we spend that? We saw it by category, but now we're seeing it by use. And you can see that 57.4% of our budget is for salaries and wages. This is just the general fund. This is the largest component of our budget. And then if you tack on the employee benefits that go along with it, which is an additional $30.3 million, you can see that between those two, we are at approximately 83% of our budget is people. 83% of our budget goes towards paying the wages and benefits of those employees in our district. In addition, if you look at purchase services, which is approximately $10.2 million, that can also include many people. Because oftentimes the district may be contracting with people or contracting for services. One area that'll be in purchase services is a portion of our transportation. So we do contract for part of our transportation. We also contract for other goods and services. So that would be under that category. Supplies and materials. That's just our general supplies, instructional supplies. That's just a generalized category that's not capital related. And then we also have a capital expenditure budget in the general fund that includes higher level or higher cost items that would be a part of our general construction. And then we just have a small amount for general other expenditures, which could include dues and memberships or other miscellaneous costs. And that just kind of, again, these two pieces of our largest pie would be our people, our wages and benefits. I did include, and this obviously is very hard to read, but we have this information. It's been shared at prior school board meetings. This is the ESSER proposed budget for fiscal year 22 that has been shared at several school board meetings. This was adopted at our June budget meeting, and it shows the general breakdown of the first portion of our ESSER funding for fiscal year 22. There will be a continuous review of these, and there'll be editing and modification of this budget as we go through that process. So budget considerations since the budget adoption back in June. is the initial allocation of ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funding. We had that approval that I just shared with you, but again, we'll be looking at and reviewing where we are, where we've come from, how we want to adjust this year, and then also looking at fiscal year 23 and 24. For those that are familiar with the ESSER funding, each ESSER has a different timeline and requirement of when we have to spend those dollars by. ESSER 2 has to be spent by September 30th, 2023. ESSER 3 has to be spent by September 30th, 2024. You may hear in different categories or different news outlets that it would be 2022 and 2023, but there's an automatic year extension, and so we're including that year extension in our dates. We also have seen some sustained enrollment loss since September, so the board will be hearing from us in January about changing our estimated revenue budget, because our revenues are calculated by how many students we have enrolled in the district. That's a large component of our general education funding. And unfortunately, where we estimated back in June, and the students that we've seen come back to the district was not quite as high as we had hoped, so we'll be doing just a slight budget adjustment to make sure that we're kind of back in where we were. And then just again, some updates on staffing changes and the addition of staff due to our ESSER allocations. And we'll be sharing more information with our school board in the coming weeks and our coming meetings. Just a few notes on your property tax statement. Bonus points if you brought your property tax statement tonight. Check for any changes on your property tax statement on your estimated or taxable market value. That might be part of the reason that you might be seeing a change in your property tax from last year to this year. So make sure that you're checking that. And your assessed values are determined in the spring. You will get a notification, usually in April, that's telling you, here's what your new property value for your property is going to be for the next year. So now won't be the time if you were to go to the county truth and taxation, I'm guessing they've already had theirs, you would not be able to do anything about your assessed value now. So be sure to check that in the spring if you have any questions, and that would be through the St. Louis County Assessor's Office. That is not the school district that has anything to do with that. And then be sure to look when you're looking at your whole property tax statement. Remember, there's multiple people who have taxing authority on your property tax statement, and making sure that you're checking to see who has changes or other things. When we looked at the property tax statement, it looked like all entities were seeing about a 2 to 2.5% increase compared to last year, and that overall tax statements, if your valuation hasn't changed, you won't be seeing a big change on your property tax statement. The overall change may not on a tax levy be reflective. So when I said that our levy was changing approximately 5.9%, most of you won't see that high of a change on your property tax statement unless you're also seeing a higher valuation change. And then please contact our business services. We have a phone number on your proposed property tax statements if you have any questions on your property tax statement. And I'm going to take a pause to see if there's any public comment or questions related to truth and taxation. I'm going to take that, since there are no questions, you enjoyed this so much that you're just taking some time to absorb it all, and I very much appreciate that. And again, we're always open and available to answer any questions you might have if you're shy about coming up and asking questions about your property tax statement. So with that, I will close the truth and taxation hearing.